Welcome to a Big Show Entertainment Network special event. Super Dave Raines and the Big Show, live and on location at the Cinemark IMAX here in beautiful Colorado Springs, Colorado, on North American premiere night for Venom.
I'm feeling really sick. I'm hearing a voice.
Eddie. You're not real. You were just in my head.
I'm gonna need Mr. Drake's property back.
I don't know. Why would we do that?
Boy, really excited for this, and super excited. Those of you that are no stranger to the program actually know who we have here. A very, very special guest. Actually was the first guest on the program way back when. So welcome back to Super Dave Raines and the Big Show, Comic Book Nate Knowalski.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
All right, thanks for coming on the show on North American premiere night for Venom. And I know that you are an expert on Spider-Man because that is your favorite superhero.
One of my favorites.
He's one of your favorites. So folks, you're in for a big treat tonight because I've got some really good questions. And we may pull Rio in here in a few minutes, too, to ask a few questions. So let's get right into it. Venom, starring Tom Hardy, who plays Eddie Brock, Michelle Williams, and Woody Harrelson. What is Venom? Where did he come from? And what's Venom's history in regards to Spider-Man?
For the movie, I've tried to stay away tonight, so I can't answer for the movie. But for comic books, Venom's initial start was in Secret Wars, where he found the suit after his suit was destroyed and couldn't find a replacement. So he found it and he couldn't get it off, and it was thought woven. Then later on, he discovered the suit was alive and was kind of changing his thought pattern and behavior.
Right.
And he kind of discarded it, gave it away. But didn't give it away. He thought he took care of it. Eddie Brock found it, and he kind of blamed Spider-Man and Peter Parker for all his failures as a journalist.
Right.
And so between, Venom being discarded by Spider-Man and Eddie Brock's view of Peter Parker discarding him or always making him a failure, they kind of formed this perfect union per se to hunt Spider-Man and make his life a miserable union or hell at first.
Right.
Because that was their goal, was to make Peter Parker, and since they knew who Peter Parker was because of the union, because Venom knew who Peter Parker was, which now gave Eddie Brock that knowledge. And it also shielded them from Spider-Man's spider sense.
Wow.
It gave them the ability to do things. But in a way, it also made him an anti-hero because he would do things for poor people, but very violently.
We will eat both your arms and then both of your legs, and then we will eat your face right up your head. You will be this armless, legless, faceless thing, won't you? Rolling down the street like a turd in the wind.
So it was like a catch-22. So he liked doing good things, but
He had a bad
he had a bad streak.
All right, awesome. Well, let me ask you, even before Eddie Brock and Spider-Man, Venom came from an alien race, if I'm not mistaken. Can you shed any light on that?
So that wasn't really done till recently.
Okay.
And that was kind of discovered by the Silver Surfer, more telling the story from, a Galactus point of view, and Galactus destroying the world. That was their hate for the Silver Surfer.
Okay.
And yes, they destroyed the world, but that was during a time where the Silver Surfer didn't know his moral background.
Okay.
But yes, they were a race, supposedly.
Okay. Awesome.
And they And Galactus did what Galactus did. He destroyed planets.
He's a destroyer. He's a planet eater. So let me ask you, how many people have hosted Venom other than Eddie Brock?
So there's been a few, and there's been about 3 or 4, and some people like the different host.
Right.
For newer comics, I'm more of the classic Venom, and I haven't kept up with them as much, and they've gone back to the classic Eddie,
Right.
Especially with the new movie coming out, and I prefer the Eddie versus the newer stuff they've tried to do. Some people like the newer stuff, but I'm more of a classic person, so that's how that stays. For me, anyway. You know how I feel about.
Oh yeah,
some of the upgrades I don't always like.
He's old school, folks.
So
that's what we're going to see tonight. We're going to see Eddie Brock as Venom.
That's what we're going to see, and I know they have to change the origin story a bit, so we'll see how people take that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell us about the Sinister 12?
So the Sinister 6, or
Sinister 12.
So
is it Sinister 6?
It's the Sinister 6. Spider-Man's.
Tell me about Sinister 6.
So Spider-Man's. So it's Sinister 6. So those were the classic Scorpion, Mysterio, Dr. Octopus, Vulture, and Venom would sometimes play well into that mix. They would sometimes, if they could, pull their resources together and get their own egos out of the way.
Right.
They could sometimes form a union, and the Rhino would join in. And sometimes a Shocker, it could change up. They would form a team to take on Spider-Man. Sometimes they were successful, sometimes they weren't so successful.
Right.
And so that was their goal.
What about Agent Venom?
So that was when Eddie Brock really wasn't in charge of the Venom suit.
Right.
And I wasn't so happy. I wasn't so great.
You weren't keen on that. Yeah, Rio's over there laughing. All right, so that's a bad question, I guess, folks. So, all right.
I wasn't really a big fan of Agent Venom, so I'm more a fan of Agent Venom, and I'm not a big fan of Carnage, but I mean, I'm more a fan of the older school. I mean, that's kind of what made them. Sometimes the more you get away from your source material, and I get it. More people, you got to change it, but I wasn't a big fan of some of the changes they made. And you could tell it didn't pay off because sometimes they go back. They're trying to reinvent things to go back. So
right, absolutely. So speaking of that, can you touch on Anti-Venom and Carnage for just a minute?
So Carnage, was an offspring of Venom when he broke out of jail after he was captured.
Right.
And Carnage was supposedly, he had no, instead of Venom had some restraint, Carnage had no restraint.
Right.
And so that was the difference between the two. And originally, the Maximum Carnage series, which I kind of liked,
right.
Venom and Captain America and a few other, they had to work pretty hard to take him down because he also didn't have some of the weaknesses Venom had.
Right.
So they had to work pretty hard to take him down. Anti-Venom, it depends on how you look at it. He comes from,
Aren't all of them related?
They all are. They all.
Venom,
That's what I'm saying.
Anti-Venom, Carnage.
They all come from offsprings from, basically at this point, from Venom because he was the last one left.
Right.
And so they all have different weaknesses and different points. Either they're an offspring from Venom or Carnage, but they all relate back to Venom in the Marvel universe. Right now, and so.
Well, Marvel doesn't have really anything to do with this movie. This is all Sony, isn't it?
This is all Sony. So, believe it or not, I was surprised because I know Disney went out of their way to buy Fox.
Right.
But I was researching. Sony has a lot more titles in their a lot more no-named Marvel titles in their collection than you would think possible.
I see.
That they could actually own and make movies from. And Spider-Man is actually part of Sony's collection, not part of Fox's.
Yeah, I know, but Sony has a really bad track record, as far as I understand.
So that's why tonight's going to be 50-50. It's a Sony title. This could go either way.
Well, we'll definitely see in just a few minutes, folks. So let me. We talked a little bit. Is this a one-off movie by Sony, or do you expect a sequel?
So Sony says this is not a one-off movie.
Okay.
So I think the crowds will determine if this is a one-off movie or not.
Yeah, but where can they go after this?
So that's what I was trying to say. I researched. They have a lot more titles than
In the Venom series.
not just Venom. Sony owns a lot more titles
Okay.
than even Disney's letting on.
The titles, you mean characters?
Characters, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Marvel
Awesome.
characters. Then I know we're so used to Disney having this huge rush of movies every other year, but if you research it, Sony has quite a few in their repertoire. Also, we're just so used to Disney pumping it out. And again, I'm not against Sony having it, because I'm also good for healthy competition, but Sony sometimes just kind of disappoints. And
I don't think they've gotten it right, and Marvel seems to always get it right. So, I'm going into this movie with an open mind, folks. So don't think I'm not. We talked a little bit about Spider-Man: Secret Wars. Last question: What are Venom's weaknesses?
So fire, Sonic, are his main weaknesses. That's usually, I'm not sure what's going to be the weaknesses in this movie,
Right.
but that's his weaknesses in the comic books. So we'll have to see what they're going to play here. So
Yeah. Now, I expect a better acting performance from Tom Hardy for this movie as we got when we had Venom in Spider-Man 3, was it?
So Topher Grace. Now, Topher Grace was not the greatest, but again, this goes to where script acting. I hate when people say some things are just because of the actor. Some of it goes to story content too. Spider-Man 3's script was not perfect, so I'm not gonna say all of it was his fault. Some of it was his fault, but I am going to tell you that some of it was script too. So
Okay.
let's give 50-50 to the script, 50 to Topher Grace, and some of it was CGI. They did not do a good. There was all three parts just failed in that movie.
Right.
And you couldn't save the people came out expecting this great Venom. And you didn't get all three pieces. You didn't get CGI, you didn't get acting, and you didn't get story.
Right.
So you came out of there and it just people felt it as soon as you walked out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Well, ladies and gentlemen,
I'm hoping for all three.
we're hoping for all three. We know Tom Hardy can bring it. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, Comic Book Nate Knowalski on Super Dave Raines and the Big Show right here from the Cinemark IMAX here in Colorado Springs for the North American premiere of Venom. And we're getting ready to go catch the show. Myself, I've got Chase here, the director of Big Show Q Ranch. I've got Kelsey behind the camera. Actually, Chase is doing his best director bit here tonight. I've got my man Rio. Comic Book Nate, we always love when you come on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, so for the whole gang from Big Show Entertainment Network, I'm Super Dave Raines, and until next time, own the love.
What the hell are you?